Good evening. It's Clarence Tong here. Thank you for joining our May ADC live stream program. It's our last one before the Democratic primary on Tuesday, June 8th. We are now only 36 days away from Election Day, and early voting has already started. It started on April 23rd, and it will continue through June 5th. You can now vote at the Office of Voter Registration and Elections on any weekday during business hours. They will be open on Saturdays, the last 3 weekends, and we have expanded, and they have expanded hours closer to the election as well. You can also request your absentee ballot to vote by mail or drop box through the Virginia Department of Elections website. You may know that we have very consequential state and local elections this year. And to quickly recap, at the state level, Virginia will have primary elections on Tuesday, June 8th for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, as well as the Virginia House of Delegates 45th District. Here in the city, there will be primary elections on June 8th for mayor and the 6 city council seats. We also have uncontested Democratic nominations in the 46th House District, which is Delegate Charnel Herring, our Commonwealth's Attorney, Brian Porter, and Sheriff is a candidate named Sean Casey. You can learn about all of our Democratic candidates on our ADC elections page, which is available at alexdems.org/elections. Ahead of the June primary, the ADC is also seeking volunteers to help educate our neighbors and friends about this upcoming Democratic primary. We need your help to staff our ADC tables at our local farmers markets in Old Town, Delray, and Cameron Station. And if you're able to help, you can sign up directly through our Sign Up Genius links or contact Daniel Mosier. And you can find those Sign Up Genius links actually on the Facebook Live chat tonight. We're also seeking volunteers for Election Day. They will help greet voters across polling locations in the city of Alexandria. And as you can imagine, with so many different statewide and local elections on the ballot, it can be a confusing experience for voters. They may have questions or want additional information, so we need dedicated volunteers to help out on Election Day. You can sign up on the Google form through the provided link or scan the QR code and select the time of day you can help. It's typically a 2-hour shift during the morning, afternoon, or evening, and our precinct team will be in touch with you. Before we get to our guest speakers tonight, I wanted to make sure that we plugged our ADC Debate Week programs, and this is Debate Week. So over the weekend, our 13 Democratic candidates for City Council participated in a pre-recorded ADC City Council debate. Our candidates were divided up into 2 panels, moderated by local journalist Michael Lee Pope. And these programs will be released on our website, alexdems.org, for everyone to watch at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, which is Tuesday, May 4th. And you can watch them at your leisure, Netflix style, but we do encourage you to watch both panels to see all of the candidates. And then this Saturday, May 8th, the ADC will be holding our mayoral debate moderated by Bob McCartney from the Washington Post. And we hope you can join us. The mayoral debate will be between Mayor Justin Wilson and our former mayor, Allison Silverberg, and again, broadcast live on our website at alexdems.org starting at 7 p.m. And finally, we have a 3rd Debate Week event. The ADC and our neighboring committee, the Arlington County Democratic Committee, are working together on a House of Delegate Democratic candidate debate on Monday, May 10th. The 45th House District debate, which will include Delegate Mark Levine and Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett Parker, will be at 7:45 p.m. And you will need to pre-register for the Zoom event to participate. So tonight, we will continue our programming to allow you to continue to hear directly from Democratic candidates running for statewide offices. And our first guest speaker tonight is Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring, who's seeking a re-election. So welcome back, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, Clarence, thank you so much for the welcome, and thank you for your leadership too. And good evening, Alexandria Democrats, or maybe good day, depending on when you're viewing this, or good morning. And I want to thank you so much, first of all, for all of your help and support over the years that you have given me. And thank you for everything that you do to help get Democrats elected up and down the ticket, year in and year out. You all really know how to turn out voters. And I did want to also just mention how exciting it was today to be able to greet President Biden and the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, in Portsmouth earlier today, and welcome them back to Virginia. It is just so good to have competency and decency restored to the White House. You know, the president has done such great work in getting the vaccine distributed and getting the rescue plan passed, in laying out very ambitious plans on gun safety and gun violence reduction, and also with his American Jobs Plan and Families Plan. It's just really good to see, you know, this great work being done. And I'm also hopeful that we are able to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which really would implement a lot of policing reforms nationwide. For those of you who I might be meeting for the first time tonight, I am first a husband and a father. My wife, Laura, and I have raised 2 children just down the road in Loudoun County, which is where I grew up. I was raised by a single mom, and my first job out of high school was working construction. And by the second summer, I'd worked my way up to running a jackhammer 58 hours a week in the hot Virginia sun, and I'm here to tell you that builds both muscles and character. But with jobs like that, and Pell Grants and government loans, I was able to work my way through college, then went to law school, and Laura and I went back to Loudoun County where I'd grown up to raise our family and establish my law practice. I am running for re-election to build on the tremendous progress we have made over the last 8 years. When we won this job back for the people, actually I should say before we won this job back for the people, the Republicans in Virginia viewed the Attorney General's office like it was a private law firm for the Republican Party. And I had a totally different vision for the job and for what an Attorney General should be. I believe the Attorney General is the people's lawyer, and that the powers of the office should always be on the side of the people. And so that's why when I was first elected, I went into court and I said, no, we're not going to defend a ban, an unconstitutional ban on marriage for same-sex couples. We're going to fight for marriage equality. And it wasn't necessarily popular at the time, but it was the right thing to do, and we won. And we have made so much progress since then. We have totally transformed the job into being a progressive powerhouse and shown Virginians just what an Attorney General can do for them. We've protected the Affordable Care Act and Planned Parenthood. We were able to get an in-state tuition for Virginia Dreamers and make sure they could get an affordable college education. We have been able to defend our new gun safety laws, fought back against dangerous white supremacist extremism, and won landmark lawsuits to remove symbols of Confederate propaganda. And I've been able to return over $300 million to Virginians in consumer relief. I led the charge to stop Trump's racist Muslim ban and got the nation's first preliminary injunction blocking it. And when Republicans wanted to keep their racially gerrymandered districts, I fought them in the US Supreme Court and won. And that led to courts drawing legal boundaries, and a wave of Democratic victories followed. I've gone to the Supreme Court to defend and protect the Affordable Care Act, not once, but twice, and have been able to eliminate the backlog of untested rape kits in Virginia, something only 6 other states have been able to do. And I can't tell you how much that has meant to survivors all across the Commonwealth who now know their Commonwealth is standing with them in their pursuit of justice and on their path of healing and recovery. So I've been able to show that I've been able to take on even the biggest fights and win. I am very grateful to have support from some fantastic Northern Virginia Democrats, people like Congressman Don Beyer and Congressman Jerry Connolly, Speaker of the House Eileen Fillercorn, and the Majority Leader Alexandria's own Charnel Herring, as well as Senator Barker, Senator Eben, and so many other legislators and local officials. And I am asking again for your support as Attorney General to be the people's lawyer, because even though we've been able to do a lot of things over the last 7.5, 8 years, there's still so much more to do. And that's why I'm asking for your continued support and your vote on June 8th or earlier if you choose to vote early. And would encourage you to join my team. And the best way to keep up with the campaign, go to the website. It's Herring4, F-O-R.
Well, thank you, Attorney General Herring, for joining us tonight. And just to the audience here, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them on the Facebook Live chat, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can tonight. So Attorney General Herring, I know that you were the first Democrat to get elected Attorney General in 20 years when you actually assumed the seat. You have won 2 terms and seeking a third. So what are the goals that you have for your 3rd term?
So, when I took over from my predecessor, Ken Cuccinelli, he and others were trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act, ban abortion, close women's health clinics, and so many other things. So there was a lot of work to do to clean up from him and his predecessors. And we really took that work head on and showed Virginians just what we could do. Then we had 4 years of Donald Trump. And so much of the work over the last 4 years was literally just shoring up our democracy and pushing back against the worst excesses of his administration and his agenda, whether it was blocking the Muslim ban or defending the Affordable Care Act in court from legal challenge in which the administration itself was trying to destroy it. Things like fighting for an accurate census, protecting DACA, those and so many others. And now with President Biden and in the White House, with Democratic leadership in the General Assembly, we can really capitalize on the momentum we have and do so much more. We can build on the progress we've been making on policing reform, criminal justice reform, and racial justice. We can build on expanding health and well-being. We can protect workers' rights. Those are going to be the areas that I think are going to be the ones that we'll be focusing on a lot. And as your Attorney General, you've seen my ability to deliver results. And with the Democratic legislature and a president that we can work with and partner with, we can do so much more in all of those areas.
Great. Just 2 questions from the audience. And you kind of spoke to this need to address racial justice. And a question from the audience, what are you doing to advance the mission of the Black Lives Matter movement?
For the centuries of racial discrimination in this country is continuing to hold our Commonwealth back, especially communities of color. And we have to do everything we can to not just talk about equity, but to really be about it and rectify the inequities that we know exist. Now, a part of that work is in policing reform and criminal justice reform. And I've talked about some of those already. The General Assembly, we've worked with them to get a lot of new laws passed to police standards like banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants, and so many other areas of policing. I've been able to get pattern and practice authority. That means going in and investigating police departments when there are patterns of brutality or unconstitutional policing. That law just took effect in March, and we're already putting it to use in the town of Windsor. We all remember those horrific videos that Lieutenant Nazario did not deserve what happened to him. And so I want to find out if those officers or if the department as a pattern of misconduct, because if so, we have more work to do to root it out. But there's a lot more to racial justice than just criminal justice reform and policing reform. And that is looking at all of the different structures and systems that we know have a disparate impact on people of color. Last year, I completed the first ever investigation into systemic racial discrimination in a Virginia school system. And the results showed an appalling climate. And this was actually stemmed from a complaint from the local branch of the NAACP, where they said only one Black student was admitted to a special high school. And so we investigated it. We went where the facts took us, and it showed an appalling climate. And it showed that not just the admissions criteria into the high school, but actually the discrimination was so systemic. It started back in the early grades, in first and second grade, where academic pullout programs separated students at that very early time and made it very difficult, if not impossible, for other students who may not start in the same launching place to get into those academic programs. So we were able to win significant policy changes, plus an independent third-party monitor to make sure the school is making progress toward addressing those inequities. And now we have a framework for doing it for other school systems that might need it. And I think also applying it in areas like healthcare. A lot of our regions now are becoming dominated by larger health systems. We know if we look into the zip code data, there are probably racial inequities as well in the outcomes. And so we now have a framework that we can look at other systems to address the inequities.
Great.
But this has to be the work of our country and our Commonwealth. And as Attorney General, I'm committed to continuing to do it.
Great. Just going to have one more question for you, and then unfortunately we'll be out of time. But since two questions came in the last minute, I'm just going to put them together. They're not related to each other at all. One of them is intriguing. I'm certainly interested in it. With the 6-3 Supreme Court, what are you most worried about? That's one question. And the second one, we have a disability rights advocate, Alex, who's in our committee, and he asked if you'd commit to working with autistic individuals, including from the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, and to push for a full-fledged seclusion ban. So that's his question. So, well, you can answer however you want in that order, and then that'll be it.
So I'll start with the Supreme Court and then wrap up with the disability question. With the 6-3 Supreme Court, I think probably what I will be watching for closely is whether the newer justices will follow legal precedent and Supreme Court precedent in cases, or whether they will follow along more ideological lines and overturn longstanding precedent. And that could have a big impact on a lot of areas that are of great concern, whether it's women's reproductive rights, gun safety, a whole host of issues that will be coming before the Supreme Court. So those are, and there are cases, but I will also say that I will be doing everything I can as cases work their way through the court system to make sure that Virginia's interests are protected, and that those efforts to try to strip away a woman's right to choose, that we will be there fighting back, pushing back, and that as gun safety laws get challenged, we will be there fighting to have them upheld. And that is what I have done over the last 8 years, and I will continue to do that. On disability, I think it is important to increase the awareness and training of so many people who have interactions with people with disabilities, so that they can make sure that they are not escalating situations in ways that they should not be. They should be trained in de-escalation. First of all, I think law enforcement has no business being involved in school discipline, period. And yes, I would be more than happy to commit to working with the disability community on these policies. And you can count on that because you have seen me do it over and over as Attorney General. For example, we fought to include people with disabilities within the protections of the Virginia Values Act, which is a remarkable piece of legislation and I think the strongest in the South to protect against discrimination on a whole lot of categories, but we were able to get those protections for people with disabilities. And then with the rise in hate crimes, I did a series of roundtables around the state and invited the disability community to come forward and share their experiences with hate crimes and invited them to have a seat at the table to have those conversations. And as a result, we were able to modernize our hate crime definition and include protections for them as well. And then on in voting rights, I will never forget a friend of mine who has some very significant disabilities tell me, and he's in a wheelchair, he's not going to drive, but he was telling me about why the photo ID law was so offensive. And he said, I don't have a need for a driver's license. And do you have any idea how challenging it is for someone like me to arrange for special transportation, to go to a DMV service center, to get a photo ID, and then arrange for special transportation back? It takes all day. And he said he cared so much about voting, he would make sure he would do it. But for others, it's really hard. And I never forgot that. And it reminded me of last fall when the Department of Elections could have done better in helping the visually impaired vote. And we worked to get a court-approved agreement to make that happen. So you can count on me to continue to work with the disability community as I have in the past, and I'll do it again, continue to do that in the future.
Well, great. Thank you, Attorney General Herring, for joining us tonight. That's all time we have for your part of it. Best of luck to you in the final days of the campaign.
Well, thank you, Clarence, and it's good to see all of you, and looking forward to seeing you in person one day soon. I'll see you on the campaign trail.
So our next guest speaker tonight is Delegate Lee Carter, who's running for governor. And on his website, Lee describes himself as not a typical politician. He was an electronic repairman and enlisted in the Marine Corps. And since 2018, has represented the people of Manassas and Prince William County. Welcome, Lee. Please tell us why you're running.
Well, thank you so much. So first of all, in case you couldn't tell, I'm having a little technical difficulty with my green screen program, but that's all right. You got the main points of the bio right there. I'm not a typical politician, right? I'm not an attorney. I'm not wealthy. I got involved in Virginia politics after I got hurt at work in the summer of 2015. And it was my experience dealing with the Workers' Comp Commission that made me realize something had to change. So I started going to folks that worked in and around the General Assembly and asking them, hey, what's the plan to fix workers' comp? Nobody had a plan and nobody seemed really interested in making one. So I said, all right, the plan has to begin with me running for office. And I took on a fight that everyone said was impossible. I challenged an 11-year incumbent in a district that was gerrymandered specifically for him. By building a multiracial working class coalition, we were able to get out the vote of thousands of people who had never voted in a General Assembly race before. And I'm bringing that same exact fight to the race for governor. I'm fighting for a healthcare system that guarantees not just access, not just affordability, but a real guarantee that everyone can see a doctor when they need to. I'm fighting for an immediate end to mass incarceration, even if it means signing thousands of pardon and clemency petitions myself. And I'm fighting for an economic development system that means working Virginians own and control the economy that dictates so much of their lives, not outside investors like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. I've never taken a single dime from any for-profit corporation or industry interest group. I never have, I never will, and I'm the only candidate in this primary who can say that.
Great. So are you available to take a few questions, Lee?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, here's a question that came through a little bit earlier regarding climate change and what do you think needs to be done to address the climate crisis here in Virginia and across the country?
I think, first of all, step one, we need an immediate moratorium on all new fossil fuel construction. The consensus is there that fossil fuels are destroying the planet, and we can't even begin to think about going in the right direction while we're still taking steps in the wrong direction. And we have been fighting for the last 8 years to stop these pipelines that Terry McAuliffe approved during his time as governor. But I think that we need to get to zero carbon in our energy sector by 2030. And I think that we need to incorporate transportation and, in fact, even housing affordability into our plans for getting to zero carbon. And we need to go beyond just not emitting new carbon. We need to have a plan for drawdown of the carbon that we have already put into the atmosphere. So we've got to get back down to pre-industrial levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. Otherwise, there will be tremendous consequences for, frankly, all of humanity. This is one of the most imperative things that we have before us in Virginia government.
No, absolutely. So the governorship is a vast job, a very powerful governorship in Virginia as well. Mm-hmm. What would your top 3 priorities be as governor?
So first of all, as I said in the introduction, I'm fighting for an immediate end to mass incarceration. Now, I've been at the tip of the spear in fights for things like abolishing the death penalty. I introduced a bill to do that last year that didn't get a hearing, but we got it done this year. And legalizing cannabis. I introduced a bill 2 years ago to do that. And even my fellow Democrats attacked me and said, Lee, why are you doing this to us in an election year? But here we are 2 years later, and we've gotten it done in an election year. But we need to end Virginia's participation in the war on drugs entirely. And we need to focus on ending mandatory minimums and really rethink what public safety means from scratch. That doesn't begin with over-policing and over-incarcerating people. And even if the General Assembly doesn't want to work with me on that, I can promise you that as governor, I will make sure our prison population goes down by at least 30% during my 4 years, even if I have to sign thousands of clemency petitions myself. That's number one. Number 2 is healthcare. Now, in 2017, I ran on a platform of fighting for universal healthcare. Now, I'd prefer for the federal government to do it, right? Medicare for all would be the ideal. The federal government has tremendous economies of scale that makes them the ideal fit for it. But logistically, there's no reason why a state like Virginia can't lead the way on that. There are other countries with population sizes and economies that are roughly equivalent to Virginia's that have universal health coverage, and they do it at least 30% cheaper per capita than our private system that leaves hundreds of thousands of Virginians with no health insurance whatsoever, and upwards of 1 million Virginians who have health insurance but can't afford to use it. And number 3 is ending our failure of an economic development system. So for far too long, we have spent tens of millions, hundreds of millions, in the case of the Amazon deal, nearly $2 billion in tax breaks, cash, and infrastructure upgrades to try to lure these massive corporations to come in and pretty please give us some jobs. Well, the problem is all those jobs go into areas that don't have joblessness problems. They have affordability problems, and it makes those problems worse. And it ignores the people who actually do have joblessness problems, the rest of Virginia that is not focused on the 3 major population centers. And so we need an economic development system where we're no longer handing out all of that money, your money, to massive corporations like Amazon and Nestle. And we instead take that money and put it directly into the hands of working people and say, this is the startup capital that you need to create your own employee-owned enterprise. Not just a job, but a business that you own, that you operate, so that it can be a pillar of the community in which you live and work. And when we do that, we will truly have control over our own economic destiny, and economic decisions that impact all of us will no longer be dictated in boardrooms in Wall Street.
Got it. One final question. A lot of political activists, like part of our committee, we all work hard every year to elect the Democratic ticket. I know you've run in a pretty difficult district. Everybody quite relieved that Trump was defeated, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris elected, but now we're worried about kind of apathy, right? And also so what advice do you have for Democratic committees like ours to keep people engaged in this important cycle? And what do you I guess bring to the table as a candidate to help us get everybody across the finish line?
Well, through my entire time in Virginia politics, I've always been the best value for Virginia Democrats, getting the most votes in the general election for the least amount of money. And the reason that I do that is because I've identified, I think, why most people stay home, right? There are millions of people in this country, in every state, that stay home on election day because they think even if I vote for the candidate that I dislike the least, nothing will change, right? They think politicians are all bought, they're all paid for. So I've spent my entire time in politics fighting against that cynicism. And instead of trying to convince people who vote Republican consistently to start voting for Democrats, I focused on reaching out to people who already agree with us, but who are unlikely to vote, and convince them to start voting. And so when I say things like, I'm fighting to lower the cost of your rent, and you know that I'm going to do it because you know I'm not taking money from your landlord, or I'm going to fight to make sure that you can actually see a doctor, and you know that I'm not going to do it, that you know that I'm going to do it because I'm not taking money from the insurance companies. And I'm fighting to make sure that we get to zero carbon by 2030, and you know that I'm going to fight for it because I've never taken any money from the fossil fuel companies. That second part is the most important in breaking through that cynicism. People instinctively do not believe that politicians are going to do what they say they're going to do. And unless you walk the walk and eschew all that corporate money, you are going to have a very, very hard time convincing them that they should take hours out of their day on election day to come out and vote for you.
Well, Delegate Carter, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing us a little bit about your campaign, and best of luck to you in the remaining days of this primary.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Next up, we have Delegate Mark Levine, who's running for the Democratic nomination for Lieutenant Governor, as well as his current seat in the 45th House District. Mark is no stranger to Alexandria, being a member of our Democratic committee, and he was elected first to the House of Delegates in 2015. Mark, I can imagine it must be a challenge to run for both seats. How are things going for you?
Well, I think they're going well. It is a challenge. It's certainly one I never intended. If we follow the Virginia Constitution, then we're supposed to do redistricting this year, and they've never had them on the same day in redistricting year. But Trump messed up the census, and Virginia Board of Elections says we can't follow the Constitution, and so here we are. But I'm very proud of the work I've done as a delegate. I'm very proud of serving all of you. I wish I could be with all of you here in person. I think that's coming soon, folks. I want to see your faces and Minnie Howard again. And I'm really looking forward to that. But y'all know me, you know my record, you know how hard I work for you. Most of you know my biography and how I was an activist for 25 years before I ever served as delegate. In Alexandria, of course, a precinct captain and voter protection attorney, but working for Barney Frank on the Hill. I have a long history, marriage equality. I think most of you know my battles, domestic violence, so forth. But it is a weird part. I will say this. I think I've been a really good delegate. I'd love to share some more about my accomplishments there, but I think I would be a really good lieutenant governor, because what I can do is some of the stuff I've done as delegate, and I can do them statewide. So, for example, y'all know that I do Mark's monthly meetups, and I've been having them every month for 6 years, and many of you have attended. And the great thing about Mark's monthly meetups, of course, is that we talk about anything and everything. You know, you've been there, right? Local issues, state issues, federal issues. I'm out to solve problems. You don't have to be my constituents. Many of you in the western part of Alexandria have come to Mark's monthly meetups, and we've got another one, obviously, near the end of May. But I think we need to do some of that statewide. I would like, as Lieutenant Governor, to visit every one of Virginia's 133 counties and cities and talk to people face to face, just like I always do in Alexandria. Actually, I'd continue Mark's monthly meetups, and we'd have them virtually from Lieutenant Governor's mansion. Well, there's no Lieutenant Governor's mansion. From Lieutenant Governor from Richmond. I'll do it from Alexandria, probably. I'll live here. But the point is that I will continue to reach out and go face to face, because I think that when you go face to face and you chat with somebody, it's a great way to get around all kinds of stereotypes. You know what they think of us in Alexandria. You know, this gay Jewish guy from Alexandria, what does he know about us? But when you're in a rural county and you're sitting there and you're sharing a meal and you're talking face to face, it's just really hard to not have that conversation. It's hard to hate. And I'm really proud of my record reaching across the aisle. Many of you know that formed the Transparency Caucus, a bicameral, bipartisan group, and that we brought full transparency to the Virginia House of Delegates and to the Senate. We now have everything live streamed, everything recorded. And that's the kind of thing that I've been able to do across the aisle, not to mention, you know, pages and pages of progressive legislation. Some of you get my annual newsletter. This is last year's, 20 pages long, 47 bills, passed half of them, wide range of topics. You'll be getting your 2021 in soon. So I'm very, very proud of my record. Should you elect me to Lieutenant Governor, I will be the kind of transformative Lieutenant Governor that works 12 months a year, which no Lieutenant Governor of Virginia has done before. So I have lots of extra time to travel around and to serve as that connection. Because I'll tell you, where Lee Carter's right, people do feel disconnected from their government. They feel apart. They feel that, you know, Richmond doesn't listen. And one of the things I've done in Alexandria is come to folks that don't necessarily come to me. Go to Chiricahua and bring a translator. Go all around the district and talk with people. And I've tried to be really accessible and really transparent. And so I want to bring that to the state government. And obviously, if I win both seats, then I'll resign in time and make sure that we have, in time for the session, a good, strong, progressive Democrat to fill the seat. But I will say this. I want to thank you, all of you, the dozens of you who came to me and said, Mark, we love you as our delegate. We wish you well, Lieutenant Governor. We're going to vote for you. But if you don't make it, will you please make sure you put your name in as delegate, because we don't want to lose you as your delegate. I want to thank you. I'm not going to desert you. I would never desert my home of 20 years. I will be there for Alexandria and for Virginia in any way I can. So that's a long answer, but happy to answer any more questions.
Sure. So Mark, let's start with a relatively broad question about the Lieutenant Governor job. I guess for outside observers, they really just see the Lieutenant Governor kind of breaking tie votes in the Senate, for example. But I think that there's an opportunity to do a little bit more there and kind of craft your own role. So I guess more specifically, like, what are the top three things like you would prioritize or want to do as Lieutenant Governor?
So first of all, if you know me, and a lot of you do, you know that three things, I do a lot more than three things. So, you know, I guess
if you could choose three.
Detailed newsletter. But I think that, again, my first priority is to go around and to collect information and to serve as really the voice of the people, so that I would have a legislative agenda, which actually no Lieutenant Governor's had since Don Beyer, but Don Beyer did this, where I put down all the bills that people want. And also work with the governor, whoever she or he may be, and I'm close with everyone running, to solve cabinet agency problems. So I'd say number one is problem solving, and that's something I'm going to do. Number two, we've got to do something about guns. Y'all know I have stood up on this, even when some of my colleagues have run away from the fight. Too many people all across America, too many people in Virginia are getting shot every day. And it's because we've come a long way, but we have a ways to go with better gun laws, whether it's background checks, whether it's banning high capacity magazines, whether it's making sure that you need to have some level of training before you take a weapon. You have to understand that if you take away a magazine, there's still a bullet in the chamber. You have to not have, you know, severe issues of mental health that mean that maybe you shouldn't be carrying a firearm. Some of you know I introduced two bills that became law this year to ban guns in polling places and in the Capitol and Capitol Square and all state office buildings that were very successful. So I think that's something we've got to do. And then I think again, it's really hard to narrow it down to three, but we have to deal with issues of inequality. And that's a broad topic. There's wealth inequality, raising the minimum wage, paid family medical leave, making sure that there's equal opportunity. But there's also things like healthcare affordability. And I've done a lot of work on that, healthcare transparency, and making sure that people know the cost of healthcare, that we bargain down the drug prices. A lot of the stuff they're trying to do at the federal level, we can do right here in Virginia. It requires a will, and it requires someone who's willing to stand up and say, hey, it shouldn't be this way. And if you know me, you know that I'm someone who has always stood firm, have always worked really hard. I've got the passion of someone who's been an outsider a lot of my life, but I've got the inside knowledge to know how to make things work and get them done. So I'll have a lot more than three, Clarence, I promise.
Great. Well, I've got two more questions for you tonight. The next one from Martha Shantz. As Lieutenant Governor, how would you advance efforts on carbon emissions reductions in the Commonwealth?
So we've done some. We certainly need to do more. The Virginia Clean Economy Act obviously gets us to carbon neutrality by 2045. It's a start. We definitely need, I oppose the pipelines. I oppose new fossil fuel infrastructure. And I disagree with at least one of the gubernatorial candidates on that. And I will tell you this, as Lieutenant Governor, I will state where I disagree with the governor. It's not like president, vice president, where you have to always agree. I do agree with most of the candidates most of the time. But we need a full-scale solution. So you've got to have offshore wind. You got to have geothermal. You've got to have distributed solar so that you can people make solar available for consumers easily, whether it's renting or buying, so that they can put it back in the system. Some of that we've done, but frankly, we can go a lot further. And it has to do with I mean, again, I do want to talk about what we've done. We joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative because this is a regional solution, but we absolutely need more incentives. And the incentives have to be for all these things, for all the green energy. And we always need to remember that there's a lot of jobs involved in green energy. So we shouldn't run away. We shouldn't hesitate from making these dramatic changes that we need to make. Great.
And then the final question that we have, I guess, could be a two-part question. First part, what is the thing that I guess you're proud of the most that you have kind of brought back to Alexandria as a delegate? And then what was the hardest thing that you got into law that you were able to get an agreement on to move forward?
Let me deal with the second one first. I think the hardest thing that I got accomplished was the Virginia Transparency Caucus, was ending centuries where all we could do was go to Richmond if we want to know what was going on in Richmond. And that meant that, frankly, the only people in the room were the lobby. And actually making it so that every single committee, every subcommittee is live streamed and recorded, that now we can participate virtually. You can testify. That was a really difficult thing to do because I did it under Republican rule, and Republicans really wanted no part of it. But one of the things I learned working in Congress is sort of how to work around the system. And so I used a technique that we do in Congress, and I basically circulated a letter and went to every single person individually, every delegate, every senator, and said, do you believe in transparency? Will you sign this letter? And I got a majority in both chambers. Again, Democrats had only 34 at the time. And then I wasn't getting more signatures, so I gave the letter to the press. And lo and behold, the press made some calls to people, and a lot more people supported transparency. And then we got 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, and even Speaker Bill Howell couldn't dispute that. So some of the ways I've solved problems, then there's other examples, Jefferson Davis in Arlington and getting money for VDOT, but sexual assault nurse examiners, I'm very proud of. That's probably I'll bring that one back. The point is that some of the hardest problems, you've got to think of sort of clever solutions, and they're not always through the front door. And so actually, I think the thing I'm most proud of for Alexandria, and I've done a lot of different things, I think probably is 24/7 support for survivors of sexual violence and domestic violence. You can go to the Nova Hospital. This is another thing I did without legislation. I did it through a federal grant. And now, I mean, it used to be that if someone is sexually assaulted at 2 a.m. on a Thursday, she or he might have to wait 7 hours to get treatment. And so what does a survivor do? They would get medical care, but they wouldn't get the therapeutic care, the post-traumatic stress care, and the forensic care to collect the evidence so that we stop these people from doing these awful crimes again. Very few of these crimes are prosecuted. And some 90% of people who commit sexual assault have done it before. And so if we're going to prosecute it, we have to make things easier for the survivors to be taken care of in a very careful environment. And now, and this is actually something not just for Alexandria, but for all of Northern Virginia, there's a place to go 24/7. We have enough nurses available that have the skills so that survivors can get treated. I've done a lot more, but yeah, I had to pick one, so I'll pick that one.
I think that's certainly a really important one. And Mark, thank you again for joining us here tonight. And I know that you'll be working hard in the final stretch before the election.
Thank you, Clarence. Thank you, everyone at Alexandria Democratic Committee. And like I said, I'm looking forward to that wonderful day, maybe this summer, when we can all get together again. Take care, folks.
We had one final guest speaker tonight, our Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett Parker, but from what I understand, there's a budget meeting tonight and it's been running long, so she prepared a quick video message. So Ricardo, do you want to run the message?
Good evening, Alexandria Dems. My name is Elizabeth Bennett Parker, and I'm honored to serve as your Vice Mayor. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in person, or perhaps live is the right word this evening. As many of you know, City Council is wrapping up our budget season, and I am working for you at our final add-delete session this evening. I know many of you, but since last year's presidential election brought us new members, I thought it would be helpful to tell you about why I'm here and why I'm running to keep serving our community as delegate. Both of my parents were in the Navy and instilled in me a sense of service to our community and our country. My mom in particular used to always tell me, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, and I've applied that to my entire career. I started a small business to fight food waste, both the negative environmental effects, as well as the fact that we waste food while people are hungry. In turn, I merged that with a nonprofit, Together We Bake, which I now co-lead, where we provide job training and other support for women returning from the criminal justice system, women experiencing homelessness, women who've recently immigrated or surviving abuse, and more. In turn, that experience inspired me to run for the Alexandria City Council in order to step up and address many of the challenges I saw our women facing more directly. And another part of my decision to run for office, like so many other women across Virginia, was Donald Trump. I am so grateful that he is no longer president, thanks to the hard work of the ADC and other Democratic volunteers. But we know that we have more work to do to move our country and our Commonwealth forward. We need to build an economy that works for all of us, especially as we focus on Virginia's recovery from COVID. And that includes passing paid family and medical leave for all of our workers. We need equitable educational opportunities, including accessible, quality early childhood education from birth, not only to set our children up for success, but to support working families and enable women to stay in the workforce. We need leaders in Richmond who will help us rebuild Virginia better after this pandemic and who will focus on the needs of women, of people of color, and of communities too often left underserved. I have unique experience and perspective to bring to Richmond, given my background as a nonprofit leader, small business creator, and as a local elected official. There are actually only 18 delegates serving with city or county government experience, and none of them are from Northern Virginia. Obviously, we face some different issues here than in other parts of the Commonwealth, and this is really an important perspective to have, given the role that local governments play in people's lives and the fact that all of the authority that locals have in Virginia is limited to what we are allowed to do by Richmond. I'm proud of the work that I've been able to do as Vice Mayor, which includes expanding access to early childhood education, increasing the supply of affordable housing, enhancing outreach to residents regarding SNAP or food stamps, declaring a climate emergency, and ensuring that future public buildings will be net zero in carbon emissions, because we need to do more to fight climate change and its impacts. I'm also proud of our response to COVID and the support that we provided to small businesses and to residents. In just the past month, we passed a strong independent community police review board, and I worked with labor groups and led our efforts to pass a collective bargaining ordinance that is strong and fair for our workers. And we became the first jurisdiction in the Commonwealth to have collective bargaining in 40 years. I've also introduced a budget amendment that will add an additional $1 million for affordable housing, create a green building staff position as recommended by our Environmental Action Plan to continue our work on reducing emissions, and also to eliminate overdue library fines, which the American Library Association has declared a social equity issue and an economic barrier to information access. This kind of collaborative, results-driven leadership is why I've been endorsed by State Senator Adam Ebbin, as well as 2 former delegates who've held this seat, Marion Van Lanningham and Rob Kopika, as well as other current and former elected officials in Alexandria and our neighboring jurisdictions. In addition to my perspective as a local elected official, there are also still only 31 women serving in the House of Delegates. And these are 2 crucial perspectives in a place like Virginia and for a district like this one. I have unique experience as a local elected official, a nonprofit leader, and a small business creator that will ensure I'm an effective advocate and leader in Richmond for this district, especially as we tackle economic recovery and rebuilding in a world emerging from the pandemic. I hope I can count on your continued support to keep serving our community, and I ask for your vote on June 8th or before if you're voting early. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all in person soon. Have a great night.
Well, that's all we have for tonight. Thank you for joining us for our May live stream program. For anybody who may have joined late, we hope that you can join us for our debate week events, which is this week. The City Council debate will be premiered tomorrow night at 7 p.m. and our mayoral debate on Saturday, May 8th at 7 p.m. And both of those programs will be on our ADC website, alexdems.org. Please stay safe and have a great night.